And as a result, this administration has shown that advancing the rights of women and girls worldwide is integral to our national security and a priority for the United States. Something that a lot of previous administrations talked about but did very little about.
A lot of talk but no action.
A lot of talk and no action. Hi guys, and welcome back to the official House of DMaaj podcast. I'm Ariel DMaaj.
And Zane here, and today we are continuing our podcast series on what has Trump done for minorities.
This is our part 2 on Trump, the GOP, and women in our country. At part 1, we focused on what Trump and the GOP have done for women prior to Trump becoming president. And today we're going to focus on what Trump and the GOP have done for women since Trump became president.
So let's get into it.
But before we do, if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing.
And hit that notification bell.
So that you guys will know when our next video, podcast, or live come out.
Or live. And of course, give us a thumbs up.
Because it really does help our channel.
Okay, Ariel, are we ready to get into it?
Absolutely. Okay, so far we've covered what Trump has actually done for women before he became for president, before he even thought of running for president. And clearly, he's done quite a bit.
Oh, definitely. The receipts are there.
The receipts are there. There you go. But having said all of that, I think it's also really important to speak about what he's actually done since he became president.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's, I think, what we want to concentrate on the most.
Yeah.
So over his first 100 days, right? Just in the first 100 days, Trump has signed 2 executive orders that supported women in business. He signed the Promoting Women in Entrepreneurship Act, which encourages entrepreneurial programs that recruit and support women, and the Expiring the Next Space Pioneers and Innovators and Explorers Act, which directs NASA to encourage women and girls to study science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and to pursue careers in aerospace.
It's great.
It's wonderful, absolutely. And since Trump has gotten into office, women have been prospering in an economy that witnessed historic growth and are continuously advancing thanks to the vision of and investment from President Donald Trump. Obviously, the latest pandemic has put a wrench in all of this, but the facts are the facts, and they are that women, prior to the pandemic that has affected women everywhere, all around the world, women in the US have never had it better prior to the pandemic.
Yeah.
And of course, obviously, Trump's political rivals and many of his detractors take advantage of their political positions or television gigs to contend that the outlook for women in Trump's America is bleak, full of despair, hopelessness, and lack of ownership over their own destiny. And, again, we're going to say this over and over again. The reality is that this could not be further from the truth.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and here's why. Because prior to the coronavirus pandemic, the United States witnessed the lowest unemployment rate for women since 1953.
Wow.
Yes. Can we say broken records again?
Wow, broken record, you guys.
Yes. And, before I continue, I just have to say this. Full disclosure, some of the media resources that I've linked below actually say that it's since 1952, but after personally checking and verifying with the Department of Labor Statistics, I concluded that it was actually incorrectly reported in those media links and sources that we've linked below, because the lowest unemployment rate for women was actually reported on May 1st, 1953, and that was at 2.7%, which is a mind-blowing number for any population, but especially for women. The interesting thing is that in December of 2019, the unemployment for women has reached, again, a historic low since 1953 at 3.2%, so only half a percentage higher.
Yeah.
And guess what the differences are between the 1953 reported unemployment and the December 2019 reported unemployment? One major difference happened back then, and that was the Korean War of the early 1950s, because it created labor market distortions, and as a result, we also had the military draft, which pulled men out of the labor market, opening many temporary jobs up for grabs for women.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when a lot of these men came back, they also took their jobs back, and all of these women who enjoyed the work and contributed to society while the men were away had to go back into their homes and become, good little housewives again. And it's interesting because that was 1953, right? That was the lowest unemployment back then because of a Korean War. Yet today, in December of 2019, the reason why we have such low unemployment is because of a prospering economy, economic boom, unlike the US has ever seen before. So this is the difference. On the one hand, we had the lowest unemployment for women when America was suffering and sent its major labor force abroad, whereas here we have the lowest unemployment because America is actually booming and doing better than ever before. before.
Oh, yeah.
And so women are not forced into the labor department. They are actually participating as a result of their own free will and opportunities that they choose to take. It's incredible, really, the changes in such a relatively short span of time of how much lives for women have improved under the Trump administration.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because prior to COVID, there were more women working than ever before in our country's history. As we've said before, the lowest unemployment rate, but also just in terms of sheer numbers, more women were working than ever before in our country's history. Some of it, obviously, is because of population growth. We now have more women, period.
Right.
But it's mostly because of the best economic times that we've ever experienced.
Yeah.
Really. Because 57% of all of the new jobs that were created under this specific administration have directly benefited women. And that's more than 4 million new jobs, which, of course, means more opportunities for women as well.
Yeah.
And there's more. He doesn't just stop there. He doesn't just stop at helping American women thrive and succeed. He actually cares about women all over the world, globally. And just as recently as February 2019, President Trump established the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative, or the WGDP, which was also led and created by his advisor, Ivanka Trump, who also happens to be, of course, his daughter.
Yeah.
Now, this initiative is the first ever, can we say broken record one more time?
A broken record
Broken
again.
record
I love this whole broken record thing.
We're just going to continue doing it over and over again because it's true. This is the first ever whole of government effort to advance global women's economic empowerment. This national security presidential memorandum by President Trump attains peace and economic prosperity for all members of society.
Wow, that's amazing.
Or in other words, this initiative advances women's economic empowerment through a whole of government approach to reach 50 million women globally, or 22 developing countries to be more specific, by 2025.
And you know, the thing is that this is going to also affect future generations as well, because he's really building these women up for success.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine the impact that this has on a child in some, developed country, whether it's in Africa or in a poor Latin American country or, really anywhere in the world, Asian countries, whatever. Imagine seeing a child who grows up in extreme poverty and all of a sudden he sees his mother, of all people, right? Not his, male father, but his mother succeeding as a businesswoman, as an entrepreneur. And whether their child is a girl or a boy, but especially a girl, imagine the kind of hope that this is going to instill in these children who are going to be growing up.
Definitely.
Seeing the world through completely different glasses, right?
Yeah.
Rose-colored glasses. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's absolutely wonderful. And this initiative focuses on efficiently and effectively directing our policy and programmatic efforts to support workforce development and women entrepreneurs, while breaking down barriers to create environments for women to participate fully in the economy. It focuses mainly on 3 pillars, right? The first one is women prospering in the workforce. The second one is women succeeding as entrepreneurs. And the third one is women enabled in the economy.
Yeah.
Right? And it's important because this initiative provides innovative educational programs. Like we said, it changes things on the ground. And this is how.
Yeah.
By providing innovative educational programs, financial and technical assistance, capacity building, and mentorship to support women's economic participation. Now, this initiative engages the private sector, the public sector, and civil society to ensure that women have the opportunity to reach their full economic potential in the United States and around the world, thereby promoting prosperity and peace for all.
Setting them up for success. I love this.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's changing lives on the ground, because this is, like we said, the whole of government approach, and it's working with everyone, right?
Yeah.
It's not just one government initiative that is set up by the government, but they're working with the private, public, and civil society sectors to really impact women everywhere and, from all walks of life.
Oh, yeah.
And as a result, this administration has shown that advancing the rights of women and girls worldwide is integral to our national security and a priority for the United States. Something that a lot of previous administrations talked about but did very little about.
A lot of talk, but no action.
A lot of talk and no action. Now, when women are economically empowered, they also reinvest in their families and communities. And that's something we talked about, I think, in our past podcasts as well.
Yeah.
Because they produce a multiplier effect that spurs economic growth and contributes to global peace and stability.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we know that women who succeed reinvest their resources in their communities and their offsprings, their children, which in turn reinvest their successes in their communities.
Yeah.
So, and again...
And I think that's the true trickle down right there.
Actually, that's a really great point, because that's a true trickle down help, as well well as trickle up.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it really is a whole of government approach where it works both ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's been so successful so far, even though it's just started just a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
But again, it doesn't stop there.
And
there's
more.
Yes, because just 4 months after Trump established the WGDP initiative, on June 11th, 2019, Trump released the U.S. Strategy on Women, Peace, and Security, or the WPS, which focuses on increasing women's participation to prevent and resolve conflicts. So by doing this, what Trump is actually saying is that he believes that in order to attain and achieve peace around the globe, women need to be an integral part of those efforts, because men were clearly not successful up until now. And it's clearly working because we just recently have been seeing peace agreements being signed left and right everywhere, you know, Middle East and Europe. So it's really quite impressive. Meanwhile, the WPS strategy establishes a clear roadmap to support women's participation and leadership in preventing conflict and promoting stable, lasting peace around the world, including commitments to address the distinct challenges women and girls face in conflict and disaster-affected areas. Again, can we say Middle East? Can we say Kosovo and Serbia, right? And under the WPS strategy, the United States is working to advance 3 mutually reinforcing objectives by 2023. And so the first objective is for women to be more prepared and increasingly able to participate in efforts that promote stable and lasting peace. Because we all know that if you want women to take part in delegations that do this really important work, they have to have the experience to do this. You can't just, you know, randomly pluck women out of anywhere, even if they're, you know, really good at what they do, but are not qualified for these positions. And so this actually establishes programs that, you know, gets these women to be able to participate as part of these delegations. The second objective is for women and girls to be safer, better protected, and actually have equal access to government and private assistance programs, including programs from the United States and their international partners and host nations as well. And the third objective is for the United States and partner governments to have improved institutionalization and capacity to ensure that WPS efforts are sustainable and long-lasting. Because none of this is going to make any difference if it's not going to be sustainable and long-lasting. And, you know, all of his efforts that he's been doing so far have been working because research and statistics show that women have been empowered to reach their economic potential. Maybe not quite full economic potential. Certainly in the US, I think they've reached, if not fully, almost fully economic potential. But now it's time for women to enjoy the benefits that American women enjoy everywhere. So since he was elected, just to show you those statistics, that since he was elected, President Trump has created over 4.3 million new jobs for women. As we said, over 4 million jobs, which account for more than half of the overall jobs that were created in this country.
That's just amazing. That's really amazing.
It really is, because no other president has ever done that before, ever.
Breaking records.
Breaking records. And get ready to say that again, for the first time ever in 2019, 1.5 million jobs were added for women alone, which accounted for more than 50% of total job gains. Again, for the first time ever.
Breaking records.
Breaking records once again. And it's interesting because the unemployment rate as a result of all of these policies among women has been under 4% for 18 straight months. Right? 18 straight months of 4% for women, which I don't think has ever happened before. I'm not actually sure, but I think that is also another broken record. Now, during the president's first year in office, the number of American women in poverty fell by nearly 600,000 people. Think of how many families and lives this affected. And of course, we've talked about this before when we talked about what Trump has done for the Black community and other minorities, because statistically, unfortunately, a large proportion of the women who are in poverty happen to be specifically Black women. And so not only is Trump helping women in general, but he's also helping women minorities, such as the Black and Hispanic community.
Wow, 600,000 women. I mean, that's close to the population of Portland. That's amazing.
That's incredible. And actually, just a few years ago, that would have been more than the population of Portland.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, these are records that he's breaking that of course, it's really nice to talk about, but they actually changed people's lives on the ground. And I think that's why you're seeing his support among minority groups increase as much as it has. Unfortunately, his support among white women has decreased because they don't feel these benefits as much as women who are minorities, because they don't suffer as much as minority women when it comes to disenfranchisement in the workforce. And we talked about this in our previous podcast, as well as the second episode when we went live, when we talked about the tax cuts and the Jobs Act of 2017, where the child tax credit was actually doubled to $2,000 per child.
Wow, $2,000 per child. So if you think about it, if you have 3 kids, that's $6,000. I mean, right there, that's a car. I mean, that's not a brand new car, but I mean, that's a car that you can drag around your kids.
And listen, I mean, if you're a struggling family, and more specifically, if you're a struggling single mother, and more specifically, if you're a struggling single Black mother, right, where, fatherless absence is a real issue for you, $6,000 for, a brand new car or whatever else, school supplies, whatever, that is a huge difference. That makes, a world of a difference.
Oh, yeah.
To be able to drive your kids around safely to school and after school programs and, whatever else, or use that money for anything, really.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop there again, right? Because President Trump was the first president ever, can we say broken record one more time, the first president ever to include a paid family leave policy in 2, not 1, but 2 budget proposals.
Well, there you go, Cardi B. I mean, that's something that, I don't know if, whoever's listening and saw the Cardi B Joe Biden interview, that's something that she brought up, that she wants a child care. Well, here you go. Here's a president who was actually...
Absolutely, yes. If you want child care, she should have been talking to Trump and not Biden, because Trump actually delivered.
There you go.
And Biden, with all of his years in office, never have. And in 8 years that he was part of the actual administration as vice president, has done nothing when it comes to paid family leave. So, again, even in the fiscal year 2020, the NDAA, or the National Defense Authorization Act, included paid parental leave for federal workers. Now, this is something that the Trump administration has wanted to make law so that companies and corporations everywhere would have to include parental leave for their workers. Unfortunately, the Democrats are stalling his efforts because they just straight up don't want to give him a win.
Yeah.
But, hopefully if we have a Republican Congress and a Republican Senate, which seems very unlikely, but if it does happen, maybe we can finally make this injustice happen for both men and women.
Yeah.
Because I think today it's really important for everyone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right? And through all of this, the Trump administration has prioritized empowering women to pursue careers and realize their economic potential. He directed more than $200 million per year to technology education grants specifically intended for women and programs that encourage participation in STEM careers, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yeah.
Specifically just for women. Additional Trump administration efforts to empower women globally include the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, or the WeFi, which was spearheaded again by Ivanka Trump to enable and support women entrepreneurs around the globe. So all the people who think that Trump is providing, his family members with these cushy positions where they're not qualified, if there's one thing that we've learned from Trump, both from his business dealings and as president in government, we've learned that he doesn't hire people based on their perceived experience. He hires people based on their actual abilities. And Ivanka Trump is a very able woman who's proven herself within the Trump organization quite successfully. And it's interesting because she's done so much to actually help women. And even her husband, Jared Kushner, is largely responsible and credited with the peace deals that were brokered between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, the warming relationship that they have with other Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia. So, obviously he's doing a really great job when it comes to picking people to take care of business. And it really doesn't matter if they're family members or not, they're producing results.
Yeah. Well, the actions show.
The actions show. But anyways, the initiative goal, the WeFi's initiative's goal, is to train women, give them access to capital, advocate for anti-discriminatory laws, and provide women with connections in the business world. Now, the World Bank actually oversees the program, but it retains the funding from many different organizations, individuals, and countries. And the interesting is that this initiative actually aims to mobilize more than $2.6 billion in capital for women entrepreneurs in 26 developing countries.
Wow, $2.6 billion.
$2.6 billion. And what's more impressive is that this initiative has already raised over $325 million in pledges from numerous sources. And of course, obviously, the United States was a major investor. They pledged $50 million alone out of the 325. But what makes this so impressive and so unique, and really, talk about, shattering the glass ceiling, the first countries to actually make commitments were both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, two countries that we just spoke about, giving a combined total of 100 million after President Trump and Ivanka visited those nations.
Wow.
So, when people talk about how the world hates us and he doesn't have warm ties with leaders, he doesn't have warm ties with leaders who take advantage of America's generosity. And some of those include traditional allies, in Europe. That's true. But he actually has very warm leaders that respect strength and respect American words that is being implemented when America says something and they do it. And as a result, they want to help and they themselves want to evolve and improve the lives of their own citizens. Because up until so recently, even under the Obama administration, women were not even allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia. They were not even allowed to sit in the front seat of a car without a male present. They had to sit in the back seat of the car, and I don't even think they were allowed to leave their house without a male chaperone. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And the United Arab Emirates did not fare much better. So now you have these women who have horrible, absolutely horrible history with anything having to do with human rights, and more specifically with women's rights, are now one of the first countries to not only pledge money to help women become better and help women to become equal to their male counterparts, they're also pledging to help stop human trafficking, which is a huge issue in those countries. And again, this is all because of the United States encouraging them to do so. And unfortunately, it just is not talked about. It really, really is not talked about.
Well, of course not. Of course not.
And so I really, really hope if you guys are listening to this, please share this information. You don't have to share our video, but just share this information with your people. Write it down, use the links and send these articles to people. Read them because we want people to know this. It's so important. People think that Trump is this woman-hating person. It's just not true.
Because mainstream media won't cover it. So the only way to get this information out there is from grassroots.
Exactly. Grassroots. I don't want to say the media doesn't cover it at all, because they do, because they need to have legitimacy among their readers for reporting accurately on information. But what they do is they instead of publishing something in a major newspaper, it'll be published on page 10 online. But if they're ever criticized, they can then say, no, we've actually did report on this. But the reality is that they report maybe 1% of everything that is happening. And, a lot of misinformation goes out there, or misrepresentation of the fact, not necessarily directly misinformation, but just pure misrepresentation, which is why the term fake news was coined by conservatives.
Or they'll mention like one positive thing and then they'll list a whole bunch of negative things to discredit that one positive thing that they're mentioning.
Which, if you read a lot of the articles that we use as links, you will find a lot of, that because you really have to read between the lines.
He did this one great thing, but look at all the negative things he did.
He did this one great thing, but he also said grab them by the pussy. He did this one great thing, but, he also made fun of Rosie O'Donnell. He did this one great thing, but he also said, Megyn Kelly's blood was coming out of her, whatever. And these things are not relevant to what he's actually doing. And of course, they're not going to talk about, what he's, the way he talks about men as well, because he talks in just as detrimental terms towards men as he does about women. And that's, again, a theme that we've been talking about for a very long time. So anyways, going back to what we were talking about, numerous other campaigns and projects have attempted to do what the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative is doing, but none of them have been able to achieve the kind of success that this initiative has on such a large scale, which again just goes to the point that if you want something done, done right, hire a business person to do it because they know how to do it correctly. Because this initiative actually facilitates loans to women entrepreneurs ranging anywhere from several $100s to thousands of dollars. And it pays for business training for women, which will, as a result in relationships with their mentors and provide them with more connections as a result as well, something that women are struggling everywhere, including here in the United States to this day. And so this is what we're talking about when we're talking about changes on the grounds, literally changing facts on the grounds, because women are not only just getting money and people are saying, here you go, here's the check, now go do stuff. They're actually getting the training, and not just the training and then, okay, now you're on your own. They now have these relationships and connections that they can utilize and use. And in many cases, they do.
Yeah.
And finally, this initiative works with local communities and government officials and lawmakers to change laws and policies which involve women, and specifically laws and policies that discriminate women in the workforce and in their local communities. The U.S. is actually using its weight to change the rights of women in countries that are not even the U.S.
Yeah, they are given the real, true tools of success.
The real, true tools of success. Exactly.
Yeah. Not just a check of, here you go, figure it out yourself, but actually tools to succeed in life.
The kind of tools that only a business person would know works. Right? Because if you're a community organizer, if you're a lifelong politician, if you're a nurse or a doctor or an Uber driver or whatever, you're not going to know or understand what it is that needs to happen in order for people to succeed. But if you're a business person, and specifically a business person that has experienced so many successes and also so many failures, you're able to learn from both the successes and the failures, and you're able to see what specifically helped these women. Now, the Trump Organization has helped a lot of women succeed through multiple different avenues, and now all they've done is they've just implemented those same successes on a larger scale and through government initiatives, and it works and it shows.
Oh yeah.
Because through this, President Trump, along with Ivanka Trump and the World Bank, hope to achieve gender equality in the business world.
Yeah.
And as a result, also just in everyday lives for women. Because women in business face so many challenges globally. Women only own roughly 30% of businesses worldwide, and at the same time, 70% of small businesses with female owners are shut down due to the government laws and regulations in different countries. And according to the International Property Rights Index, about 25 million women do not have equal rights in the Middle East and North Africa region alone. Just in those regions, which is really the regions that the Trump administration is focusing on the most as a result of this.
Wow, I just want to take a moment here and just really emphasize that 25 million women. 25 million women. That's
so many women. Those
do not have equal rights.
Those are states, and those are real lives. That are affected. Those are people who are really, really suffering. Specifically, again, think of what we know of the Middle East and Africa, and think of how women are portrayed there. We're talking about from laws that prevent them from owning properties, to leaving their house, to laws that force female mutilation at later stages of their age, where this pain and trauma really carries with them the rest of their lives. And this administration, unlike previous administrations that paid lip service, and not just the Obama and Biden administration, I'm talking about Bush as well. I remember Bush talking about this a lot. I remember Bush going to Africa and talking about this, but actually doing very, very little about it. And yet Trump, whom the establishment, the Bushes and the Bidens and the Obamas and the Clintons all hate, the media hates, he's actually doing something about it and making real changes for women. It's incredible because globally, an estimated nearly 40% of women in wage employment do not have access to social protection. 40% do not have access to social protection. Women are less likely than men to have access to financial institutions or even have a bank account, something so basic as a bank account. While 65% of men report having an account at a formal financial institution, only 58% of women do worldwide.
Wow.
Yes, and of course, most of these women, when we're talking about worldwide, come from Western developed nations. So those numbers in developed countries are way below the 50%, way below. And actually, as early as August 20th, just so recently in 2020, right, just about a month ago, the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, or the WEFI, announced its third funding allocation comprising of $49.3 million, which are expected to benefit over 15,000 women-led businesses and mobilize about $350 million additional dollars of additional public and private sector resources. And this is specifically going to affect women businesses that have been hurt as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. So this is what this initiative is doing now. It's not just helping women abroad or women in the United States in general. It's specifically organized in such a way where this initiative is actually able to help women during different economic times, and it's actually able to mobilize so many resources and allocate them to help women who are struggling today. not just in general, but today because of a pandemic that the whole world is struggling with.
Yeah.
And over 65%, in fact, of the most recent allocations will benefit women entrepreneurs in low-income countries and countries affected by fragility and conflict. And as a result of these efforts, these programs backing women-led businesses will now expand to 61 countries.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, just 61 countries. That is a mind-blowing number of women who are going to be benefited as a result of this.
That's great.
Right? Now, take the most important issue for families, right?
Yeah.
The economy. Because nothing good can happen to families if the economy is not doing well. Because if people cannot support themselves, they can't support their families and those that are around them.
Yeah.
So since Trump was elected pre-pandemic, our nation has created more than 7 million jobs since the 2000 election. And we've keep on saying over and over again, women have filled over half of those positions or more than 4 million of those vacancies, which is incredible. Now, as the unemployment rate declines, so too does the number of women in poverty. We talked about the 600,000 number earlier, just in the first year of Trump's presidency. But so far, overall, there's a decrease of 1.5 million women in President Trump's first 2 years in office. Now, think about it. That's not 1.5 million people. That's just 1.5 million women, right?
Yeah.
How many people overall have been uplifted from poverty? And again, we also know that the majority of women in poverty are specifically Black mothers and also Hispanic mothers and other Native American women and just in general, minority women in general, but also white women, of course. So this affects women of all races and all backgrounds. Now, another important statistics that worth noting is the fact that U.S. life expectancy has increased for the first time in over 4 years. Now, that's maybe not a huge record, but it's still a broken record, within the last 4 years. And of course, it affects both men and women because both genders' life expectancy has increased. A lot of it has to do with the Trump's administration efforts in combating the opiate crisis that has ravaged American cities nationwide. And it also has to do a lot with the Trump's administration initiatives, specifically supporting women's health issues that we'll talk about in just a little bit as well. But this is definitely something that's affecting women, whether directly or indirectly through substance abuse, whether they had issues with substance abuse or their loved ones, but also due to improvement in their healthcare as a result of Trump's efforts. Now, fatal drug overdoses dropped just in 2018 alone for the first time in nearly 30 years. And cancer-related deaths have also declined. Now, again, all of these things that have happened is not because the scientific community came together and they were able to create these new treatments for cancer-related deaths. It happened because Trump specifically promoted different initiatives, signed specific executive orders, and signed laws that specifically promoted research in cancer-related deaths. So when Biden says, as president, he is going to end cancer once and for all, that's a really nice sentiment, especially because it has affected his family so strongly, but Trump is actually the one getting it done. And again, it doesn't stop there. I keep saying this over and over again. There's more! Because he's also ushered in a golden age for women in the CIA. So he's changing the government from within, from having the most senior level positions for women in government, even though that's never talked about, to also ushering this golden age for women in the CIA, because he's not only appointed Gina Haspel as the agency's first female director, but he also made Elizabeth Kimber the first woman ever to lead the agency's clandestine service, rewarding the CIA's band of sisters who have worked day and night to keep our country safe since 9/11. Now, can we say broken record again? Once again, broken record. And, between the band of sisters and the squad, I will take the band of sisters any day of the week, for sure.
Well, the band of sisters aren't anti-Semitic, so.
Yeah, there we go. The band of sisters are definitely not anti-Semitic. And as a matter of fact, they do a lot to keep a lot of Jewish places of worship and Jewish places where communities in general gather and, Jewish communities in general safe with all of the rise of anti-Semitism that our country has experienced as of late, and they're doing a lot to keep these communities safe, especially given the fact that most of the rise of the anti-Semitism comes from Democratic-leaning communities. So, it comes directly from counties that are very heavily Democrat-leaning, and the more Democratic a community is, the more anti-Semitic it is, just from statistically speaking. So this is just another example of how Trump is helping not just women, but minorities in general. But going back to women, Trump has also signed the Allow States and Victims to Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, or the FOSTA as it's known, which includes the Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act, or the SESTA, which is as is known, which both give law enforcement and victims new tools to fight sex trafficking.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, again, because we talk about this all the time, and we talked about this in our previous podcast as well, about how the U.S. was the worst offender of the developed world when it comes to sex trafficking.
Which is absolutely terrible.
Which is absolutely terrible, extremely sad, and it has now become a symbol of how to fight sex trafficking. So, we went from being the worst country to literally now setting the standards of what fighting sex traffickers should look like. And that has all happened under this administration. And by the way, part of this administration efforts to fight sex trafficking has a lot to do with illegal immigration and the wall that is being built at our southern border, as well as the deportations that have increased thanks to Trump under ICE, because a lot of the people who are deported have been shown to be sex traffickers. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Now, through Trump's anti-trafficking coordination team, as they're called the AC Team Initiative, federal law enforcement more than doubled convictions of human traffickers and increased the number of defendants charged by 75% in AC Team districts. In 2018, the Department of Justice, the DOJ, has dismantled an organization that was the internet's leading source of prostitution-related advertisements resulting in sex trafficking. Why the Obama and the Biden administration, who are viewed as, the most pro-female administration ever, why they didn't do anything about it, I really don't understand, because again, the reality is that they really were not, and they did very little to help women besides lip service. So, even though it made women feel good in the moment, their lives really did not improve very much. And Trump's OMB, or the Office of Management and Budget, published new anti-trafficking guidance for government procurement officials to more effectively combat human trafficking. Now, Trump's Immigration and Customs Enforcement's Homeland Security investigations arrested 1,588 criminals associated with human trafficking. Now, that is a large number. It might not seem like it, but it is a very, very large number when historically speaking. And to build off on that, the Trump's Department of Health and Human Services provided funding to support the National Human Trafficking Hotline to identify perpetrators and give victims the help that they actually really need. And the statistics that I found were between October 2017 and March 2019. And just through that short period of time, the hotline actually received 178,911 calls, texts, chats, online tips, and emails.
Wow.
And it identified 16,862 potential human trafficking cases.
Wow.
I mean, think about that. 16,862 potential human trafficking cases. Not people, but cases. I mean, each case can have multiple women who are trafficked sexually. And we also know that, it's not just women, it's also children. And, it could be boys and men as well, but it mostly affects women and children. Those are just, mind-boggling, staggering numbers that we're talking about. And it provided 14,419 referrals to services. So again, these are initiatives and programs that are not empty lip service. They are affecting thousands of people. Thousands. As a matter of fact, by this point, hundreds of thousands of people who were directly associated with this hotline, right? And Trump's DOJ provided grants to organizations that support human trafficking victims, serving nearly 9,000 cases just from July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2018. And that's just in 1 year. So imagine how many women are going to be affected over the years thanks to these grants and these organizations that support these human trafficking victims, which again, mostly happen to be women and children.
And that's true action.
That's true action, really true action. And the Department of Homeland Security has hired more victim assistance specialists, helping victims get the resources and support that they deserve and really need. And he's getting so much hate for the work that he's doing in the media, but part of the reason why he's getting so much hate is because he's getting rid of people left and right. When people talk about the exodus from the Trump administration, I always say good. Clearly these people were not doing a good job in the first place, because if they were, they would stay. Trump has a very, very short patience for people who don't produce. He hates lazy people. And these people clearly were not doing a good job supporting the victims that they were supposed to support and help. And so Trump got rid of them and he replaced them. And there's a lot of angry people about this because they've lost their cushy jobs.
Yeah.
They've also lost a very cushy work environment where they were able to sit on their butts and do very little, because now they're measured by their results.
Yeah.
And if they don't comply, they're out. Simple as that.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Because that's how you get true action. That's actually how you get true results, is you get people in there to do the job.
You do. And that is exactly how it is. And that's why I think government has always been looked at so negatively. Because
look at the DMV.
It's so slow. Exactly. Because look at the DMV. It is so slow to act because, you can't really get fired when you're a federal employee or a government employee. And there's really not a lot of pressure to be productive. As a matter of fact, you get rewarded if you're not productive with the way that the system is set up. The longer it takes you to actually follow through with projects, the more resources you need, the better. The more the government will fund your organization.
Yeah.
And what Trump is trying to do is he's trying to really thin out these organizations and
increase the productivity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, when we're talking about women, I think, we talked a lot about women and mothers and how, he's helped them in terms of childcare, which is something that's very, very important. But he's also done so much more than that because, this chauvinistic president, the worst president for women ever, out of any presidents ever, anywhere, worldwide and globally and in the universe, this terrible, terrible president actually signed a bill to require airports to provide spaces for breastfeeding moms.
Oh, I like that.
Right? Can you imagine the audacity of Trump to care about new mothers when they travel? To provide them with spaces where they could breastfeed privately and in peace without having to worry, with other people.
Any judgment,
Any judgment, especially, now that breastfeeding is such a hotly contended issue with women breastfeeding in public places, and a lot of women having issues with this. Trump is actually saying, you know what? They have the right to breastfeed their children wherever they are. Just because you're a mother does not mean that you should go breastfeed your child at a dirty bathroom. It does not mean that you should not be able to breastfeed your child when you're out at a restaurant or working. And he's making sure that establishments and places of business respect new mothers by allowing them the opportunity to care for their children.
Yeah.
And aside from signing into law up to 12 weeks of paid parental leave for millions of federal workers, which we've talked about in the past, he also signed the Preventing Maternal Deaths Act of 2018 to support states in their work to save and sustain the health of mothers during pregnancy, childbirth, and in the postpartum period to eliminate disparities in maternal health outcomes for pregnancy-related and pregnancy-associated deaths, to identify solutions to improve healthcare quality and health outcomes for mothers and for all other purposes for that matter. So in short, basically, what this does is it provides funding for states to actually develop maternal mortality reviews to better understand maternal complications and identify solutions, and largely focus on reducing the higher mortality rates for Black women specifically, because the women who suffer from this the most are, again, Black women. And it's really a theme. And it's, for me, it's heartbreaking to see the Black community be so monolithic in its thinking and its support of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really glad that we're starting to see the first cracks of this support in the Democratic Party thanks to Trump, because he's done really the most to help the Black community, but more specifically Black women, because this touches mostly Black women.
Yeah.
And in fact, the United States has the highest rate of maternal deaths in the developed world. And, more specifically, this is really something that just astounded me when I read about this. It was so sad and so disappointing because in other developed countries, the rate of maternal deaths has actually been going down in the past few decades, right? Decades. Few. Not one, but few.
Yeah.
But in America, those rates have actually gone up. And again, why have they gone up? Because Democrats, and to some extent Republicans when they were in office as well, really didn't do much to help local poor communities who were living in poverty that were mostly Black communities. The Democrats didn't have to do anything when it comes to the Black community because they were already getting their votes just systematically and automatically.
Yeah.
And the Republicans were scared to have anything to do with the Black community for fears of are being called racist. And, we've talked about this in the past, and Donald Trump just did not care.
Yeah.
He went for it. He said things that were not popular. He did things that were not popular, and he's helping the Black community. And I think that's why the Democrats are so up in arms calling him racist, because they're seeing their support erode as a result of this. And,
while they're threatened.
If they don't have support of the Black community, they don't have support, and they have no way of getting into office.
Yeah.
And that's, side note, another reason why they're so supportive of illegal immigration, because today, 60% of all newborns are Hispanic newborns, and a large proportion of those Hispanic newborns are newborns to illegal immigration who comes from Hispanic countries. And so if you're able to create another group that will vote monolithically for you, you no longer care about the first group, the Black community. And so the Democrats are basically just bidding their time to make sure that they have enough support from illegal immigrants and their offsprings who become illegal here in America due to the laws that provide citizenship and rights to people who are born here, whether their parents come here illegally or not. They're just bidding time, making sure that these kids become 18 before they drop the Black community altogether. Yeah. That's really what is happening.
Yeah, that's really, really sad.
And according to the CDC, about 700 women die each year in the United States as a result of pregnancy or delivery complications. Mm-hmm. Now, since Black women live in poverty, they live in areas that have hospitals that get less funding and are not performing as good as hospitals that are located in better communities. And that's part of the reason why so many women die just as a result of their pregnancy or delivery complications. Something that in 2020 America should just never happen. That's outrageous.
Yeah, those are third world country problems.
Yeah, those are third world country problems. Exactly. I remember my mom constantly telling me that if I was born in Russia, where she's from, she would have died because I was a 12-pound baby. So she would have had, severe complications during delivery, and she would have most likely died. And thanks to the ability to have really good care and, of course, a C-section that was provided to her in a very developed country like Israel, she was able to thrive and survive, and I was able to be born healthy, and so was my sister that was an 11-pound baby. But those are things that a lot of white women, Caucasian women enjoy in this country, but a lot of women of color don't enjoy to the same extent as other women's. Yeah. So I'm so glad and so happy that Trump is actually doing something about this to benefit women in this country.
Oh yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Because 700 women may not sound like a lot in terms of the number when you look at the population of hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
However, that is an obscene, grotesque number when you compare it to other developed countries.
Yeah.
And actually, at the time, the president of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, Dr. Lisa Hollier, called it a major step towards eliminating preventable maternal deaths in our country.
Yeah.
And according to Hollier, and this is a direct quote from her, this landmark legislation has been a long-held goal for the ACOG and is a crucial step to reversing our country's rising maternal mortality rate. Now that federal funding for maternal mortality review committees, which review individual cases of maternal death, has been authorized through the signing of the Preventing Maternal Deaths Act, we can find out why American mothers have been dying. Which basically means that they didn't even know why. They didn't even have the funding or the resources to find out why women were dying. Because again, like we said, the majority are Black women, and really no one cares. Or at least no one cared up until Trump came into office.
That's just so sad.
It's not just sad, it's gross. It's disgusting that this has been allowed to happen for so many years when other developed countries have actually been doing something about it. There's a roadmap to what we can do in order to, solve this problem, and nothing was done about it because, 700 mostly Black women, who cares? Well, Trump cares. That's who cares.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, this is so important because this piece of legislation will not only help save mothers' lives, it's also the first step in changing America's dire track record on maternal mortality, which, again, it's abysmal. Also, this is something that is really dear and close to a lot of people's hearts. I'm talking to you, third-party animals specifically. President Trump has called on Congress to pass school choice legislation so that no child is trapped in a failing school because of his or her zip code. Again, this is something that affects specifically mothers in poor communities, and as a result, specifically Black women, but women everywhere in general who really care about the education that their child gets. And we're going to do a specific podcast talking just about this issue in the future. But this is something that allows mothers to choose where they want their children to actually be educated so that their children don't have to go to schools that are near their homes, even though their schools are failing.
Yeah.
Right? And President Trump has actually called on the Democratic Congress to pass school choice legislation so that no child is trapped in failing schools because of his or her zip code.
Yeah.
Now, the president actually signed funding legislation in September of 2018 that increased funding for school choice by $42 million to help these mothers who were trapped in these horrible positions where they can't better their children's education. And the tax cuts that were signed into law by President Trump, and this is, again, very, very important because so many, specifically, I think women care about their children's education more so than men. Obviously, men really care about their children's education as well, but studies show that women are much more invested in the education of their children. Mm-hmm. And this is why the tax law that was signed into law in 2017 and the tax cuts that were signed into law by President Trump were so important because on top of everything that we talked about in the past, President Trump also promoted school choice by allowing families to use the 529 savings plans for elementary and secondary education, or the K through 12 education, and not just for college savings, which is what they were for earlier. So before, you could not take money out of the 529 savings plan if you wanted to use that money for your elementary or secondary education for your child, unless you were willing to pay ridiculously huge fees for it. And the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act signed into law by Trump actually doubled the maximum amount of the child tax credit available to parents and lifted the income limits so that more people could claim it, which is amazing because Republicans are always blamed for decreasing the limits so that less people are able to claim benefits that the federal government provides them. But here, Trump has actually lifted those limits so that more people could claim it and enjoy it. That's a federal benefit that directly affects many women, and specifically, of course, single mothers. Now, it also created a new tax credit for other dependents. So a lot of women are now able to get more money as a result of other dependents who are not directly their children. Now, continuing with the theme of childcare and child education, President Trump signed into law a $2.4 billion funding increase for the Child Care and Development Fund. That happened back in 2018. It provided a total of $8.1 billion to states to fund childcare for low-income families.
Well, there you go, Cardi B.
There you go, Cardi B. If that's something that you really care about, you really need to rethink your support for Biden and move it towards Trump. Now, the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit, or the CDCTC, signed into law by Trump, provides a tax credit equal to 20 to 35% of childcare expenses, $3,000 per child and $6,000 per family, plus flexible spending accounts allow you to set aside up to $5,000 in pre-tax money to use for child care.
Wow.
Yes, this is a major game changer. Major game changer that has really allowed a lot of women and just families in general to be able to concentrate more so on their children's future education at a time when our children and youth are actually becoming less and less educated. And we're seeing that, not only less and less educated in terms of their elementary education, K through 12, and in terms of their ability to just pass basic writing and math tests, but also less people are attending universities. And the people who are attending universities are also less educated because they're not really taught very much. They're just taught to recite information for tests. And so this really changes things.
Just to pass those exams.
Just to pass those exams. Now, if more children can go to better performing schools, more children will, of course, be able to get into better universities. And, if these schools are better performing, when these children go to the universities, they're going to be able to detect when a university is not doing them a service by actually educating them on how to critically think and how to actually learn not just math and writing skills, but also learn about global and more specifically American history.
Which is vital.
Which is vital. Now, speaking of children, by the way, prior to Corona, coronavirus pandemic, youth unemployment was at a 50-year low.
Wow.
Again, can we say...
a 50-year low record.
Broken record again, right? At a 50-year low. And the reason why this is so important is because when the youth is busy, they have less time for mischievous things such as drugs or other things that they shouldn't be doing, crime.
Yeah.
So it's really great because, again, we're talking about Trump changing society from within, and it starts with our children. And speaking of changing societies from within and improving the lives of Americans everywhere, one of the major things that the progressive left and Democrats have been talking about for years now is the wage gap between the highest paid workers and the lowest paid workers, and closing of that wage gap. And it's, I think, very fascinating because that wage gap has actually increased under previous administration. But the interesting thing is that under the Trump administration, the 25% lowest paid Americans enjoyed a 4.5% income boost in November of 2019, which outpaced the 2.9% gain in earnings for the country's highest paid workers.
Wow.
And this is something that we're seeing everywhere. You know, people are really upset at the fact that millionaires are making more money, at the fact that billionaires are becoming richer, the fact that corporations are making more money. I personally really don't care. I'm glad when a millionaire is making more millions, when a billionaire is able to make more billions, and when corporations are able to make more money, you know, as long as the people who are living in poverty and are struggling, and even people living in middle class, living paycheck to paycheck, as long as they're able to increase the amount of money that they make, I'm happy for everyone to make money.
Yeah.
And what's great about this is that under the Trump administration, we're seeing that the middle class wage gains are outpacing the highest paid workers as well. But the highest beneficiaries of the closing of the wage gap are actually the lowest paid Americans. And in many cases, that of course has to do directly with women.
Yeah.
So I think it's just incredible. And I'm so happy because we are truly improving our society very, very directly and really helping Americans live so much better on a day-to-day basis through making more money and being able to afford basic needs for their families.
Yeah.
And thanks to his reforms, working mothers and women around the country today actually have higher purchasing power, particularly since they are able to keep more of their earnings now. And this is something that we've been talking about for as long as we can remember because it really, really does make a difference when a mother is able to afford the milk that she needs for her child. This benefits her not only economically, but also mentally as well. And it affects her overall health in general, physical and mental well-being. So what we've seen throughout Trump's career as a business person, is a real estate mogul, and as a very successful politician as well, what we've seen is that Trump's kindness really has no bounds. And his generosity has and continues to touch the lives of people from every sex, race, and religion. Because when Trump sees someone in need, he genuinely wants to help. And we've talked about this in other podcasts as well, from women to men to Jews to Hispanics to Indians to Native Americans to anyone. And it shows.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Because even 2 decades ago, right, long before he ran for president, there was a television interview where Oprah directly asked Trump if he would ever run for president.
Yeah,
and I
remember that.
Do you remember that? Yeah, right? And at the time, he said, if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country.
I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not, but I do get tired of seeing the country ripped
Why
off.
would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I just probably wouldn't do it. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country.
And after so many years, that day has finally come. Trump saw that America is in need, and he wanted to help. Right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
How inconceivable of him to
how,
want to help.
How dare him?
How dare him, right?
I'm offended.
Inconceivable of him to want to help, you know, the country that has given him and his family so very much.
Yeah.
And, as we've said before, since he took office, the economy has has skyrocketed to the likes of which we have never seen, mostly benefiting women, but benefiting everyone, really. And that's something that Trump, I think, has seen for years and talked about it during the Bush times and during Obama times when he said, families are struggling. I'm seeing this everywhere, more specifically women. And now, after 7 million new jobs, more than 4 million of which have been filled by women, he has changed that. He has fulfilled his promises.
And so for people who are listening, who are on the left, who are progressive, and how can you support Trump? Look at all he's done. Well, here you go. Look at what all he has done.
Absolutely. And we now have literally hours and hours and hours of content where we just detail, step by step, everything that Trump has done, touching every single part of our society. And we have to condense because there's really so much more. This president just does not rest.
Yeah.
With all of the reports about him watching TV and, golfing and everything, I had a real problem with Obama having so many golfing retreats and vacations, and because not a lot was being done. And, it's interesting because Trump is actually taking more vacations than Obama and has golfed more than him. Yet he was able, in a very short amount of time, to do so much more to help Americans that I don't fault him for it. If you play hard, you party hard. And Trump has proved that to be the case. When he's on like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah.
And when he's off, he needs a moment. And I respect it.
Yeah.
I definitely do. And again, just to recap everything that we've been saying so far and kind of wrap up this podcast as it's coming to an end, the president's policies have really made a true and major difference for American families nationwide.
Oh, yeah.
The typical married couple with 2 children saved almost $3,000 on their federal taxes last year, thanks to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And the Trump administration has taken numerous steps to rein in out-of-control prescription drug prices, among other family-friendly initiatives.
Yeah.
Now, think about this, right? His tax cuts are very unpopular, extremely unpopular among the American public. And I think it's very sad because unlike the Obamacare legislation that was passed with, thousands and thousands of pages and thousands of laws that had nothing to do with healthcare, this specific law had everything to do with tax cuts. And if people knew more about it, they would love it. If people knew more about this law that is so unpopular among the American public as a result of all the misinformation that received through the mainstream media, I think this would be one of the most popular legislations ever signed. Not the most, but certainly one of the most popular legislations ever signed because it made such a huge difference on such a macro level for people, macro and micro level for so many people around this country. And unlike the Democrats who paid lip service to women's issues while advocating policies that actually hurt women because they want to keep women down, because they want to make sure that women continue to vote for them, because once women are doing well, they're able to think for themselves better and they're able to depend less on the government. And if they depend less on the government, then they no longer need the Democrats' policies that make them dependent. So unlike the Democrats who advocate policies that actually hurt women, President Trump has actually implemented an agenda that produced significant gains for women in states and cities such as, everywhere.
Well, there you go. Well, you guys, we really hope you have enjoyed this podcast.
This was so much fun to do. This was one of my favorite podcasts to write, and I really, really, really enjoyed having this conversation with you today.
It has been a lot of fun, and in our next podcast, we are going to conclude this whole entire series, Ariel. This is going to be the conclusion of our series on what has Trump done for minorities.
Yes, absolutely. And I think our next episode is going to be the one episode that a lot of people have been waiting for the most. And it's going to concentrate mainly on what Trump has done for the LGBTQ community. So many questions. There's so much misrepresentation and misinformation on Trump's treatment towards our community. And I think it'd be really, really fascinating to open this discussion up and actually see all the ways that Trump has benefited the LGBTQ community in this country and abroad.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, I'm constantly getting messages on my Walkaway video and emails asking about trans issues, gay issues. I mean, we're gay ourselves. We're drag queens. So this is definitely one of those hot topics, especially with the Supreme Court and the situation that's going on with that. So we have a lot to cover.
Absolutely. So much to cover, but I think it's going to be fascinating. And we'll definitely talk about all the hot button issues, such as the trans military ban and many, many other issues that I think we will be able to shine a light a little bit on them as well.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And of course,
If you haven't done so already and you enjoy what we do, please consider subscribing to our channel.
And hit that notification bell.
So that you guys will know when our next video, podcast, or live come out.
Absolutely, you guys. And of course, give us a thumbs up.
Because it really does help our channel.
And until next time.
Bye for now.
Bye.